live dialogue here during Climate Week in New York City, here on Saturday, September the 26th. It's fabulous. We're very grateful that you've all joined us. A series of clean energy speakers that have traveled largely from the New York region, and a whole series of student leaders who have helped to co-design and create this CleanEnergyU dialogue. So we're delighted that you're here with us. CleanEnergyU is essentially a dialogue that brings together particularly student leaders to come into conversation directly with clean energy leaders like some of the panelists that you'll be meeting here, who are themselves helping to accelerate our progress towards that clean energy future. It was the brainchild and inspiration of many of the students that you will get to meet here on the panel, and we're very grateful for them for having created this opportunity and collaborating with companies like Chevy in order to help make that happen. So, in the CleanEnergyU dialogue this fall, which is going to be taking place not only here, but it's going to be taking place in campuses across the country, in classrooms that are going to be having dialogues like the one that we're going to be getting into today. You'll see it takes place on the CleanEnergyU Twitter feed that several of you have already posted your selfies to. Thank you very much. As we go through the workshop today, continue to post your ideas, your solutions, your group ideas to that hashtag CleanEnergyU website. Because this is where a lot of the folks are going to be following the dialogue, not only today, but throughout Campus Sustainability Month. And we've actually got folks who are going to be joining us virtually. There's a live stream camera at the back there, so folks can follow this from wherever they're located in the United States. And campuses and students are going to be able to review this panel dialogue before they go into their own classrooms if they want. So we really appreciate the number of different kind of dimensions of the CleanEnergyU dialogue that have come today and you to help make this work. Okay, so the dialogue itself this time is anchored around two core questions. And you'll see them online. You'll also see them at the back here. The first question over here is, how can communities best collaborate in order to move to a clean energy future? So what is it that companies, campuses, cities, non-profits can do to reach outside of themselves to partner with others to move us on a faster basis to a clean energy future? And the second question is over here. If we're going to get to that clean energy future, what kind of leadership qualities are going to be needed to get us there? Now, I mentioned those core questions, not just because we're going to talk about them in the context of the panel dialogue, but because later in the workshop and later in classrooms across the country, I want you, everyone here, to be thinking up solutions, their ideas, your ideas, for the clean energy solutions that you think are going to get us to a clean energy future. Because when we go into the interactive part of the dialogue, you're going to be making posters that are going to look like a bit like this. Here's my idea, here's my solution, and you're all going to build one, okay? So listen up, because there's a series of really fantastic creative ideas that are going to be coming, and all of you are going to have some great solutions, and we want to listen and hear from all of you, okay? That's a prequel, okay? That's coming later. All right, so let's see. So in the next 30 minutes or so, we've got the privilege of really delving into these questions, this question of how communities best lead to a clean energy future collaboratively, with many of the amazing clean energy leaders who are assembled here. And I want to maybe start by asking Mark Kenber, who is CEO of the Climate Group. Climate Group convened the entire Climate Week event. You probably saw the green lights on the Empire State Building. Okay, this is the guy that made that happen. All right? Okay. Okay. Yeah, he got the Pope, and various presidents, I am not kidding you, and various heads of states, I am not kidding you. All right. Now, he's had dialogues like this now in about 6 different countries. All right? So we thought we would ask him, okay, Mark, you've talked to all sorts of folks all over the world. What are the top 2 or 3 insights that came out of the previous dialogues that you've held? How do we get to that clean energy future collaboratively most effectively?
Great, thank you, Sue. It's a pleasure to be here. I didn't put the green lights on the Empire State Building, but we did have something to do with it. As Sue said, we've done future of energy dialogues around the world, and with a mix of people from the nuclear industry, the coal industry, the oil industry, new energy, from communities, from financiers, and it's a striking similarity of what was said. in all these places. And I'm just going to pick on 2 or 3 themes that have come out which are particularly relevant to today's discussion. One is we're going to go from centralized to decentralized. We're going to see a shift from power concentrated in a few companies to much more diverse, dispersed sources of power. And linked to that, the rise of the prosumer, the buzzword of the last couple of years. We're not just going to be passive recipients of electricity and energy, we're going to be producers as well. Some of us already have solar panels on our roofs, we'll be using electric vehicles as storage mechanisms, we'll be both selling to the grid, selling to our neighbours, selling to our communities. Community is another key part of it. The rise of the community energy company, owned by the users, so not just single individuals or single companies with their solar panels or wind turbines, but community groups. The one sector in my country, in the UK, in the energy sector, that has really grown are community energy companies. And where there used to be a few people who were willing volunteers, poorly paid, these are now professionally run companies who are competing with the big utilities and putting the frighteners on the big utilities as well. And all that's made possible by the 4th big theme, which is the rise of the use of information technology. How our energy systems, our transport systems, our homes, our businesses are so connected nowadays. We can control our appliances with our smartphones. We can, cars that have updates of their software. The whole of the energy system is connected. And that's the enabler for this community energy, us as prosumers, the distribution, and of course, new companies coming in all the time. Companies who never had anything to do with energy are now energy companies as well as other things.
Fantastic. So, Mark, if I get you right, the rise of energy that's being generated locally in our homes as prosumers, and some of these other new companies coming into the picture, I think you said they're putting the frighteners on the utilities, right? All right, I want to bring somebody else into the dialogue at the moment who's putting the frighteners on the utilities. I want to introduce Anastasia Schenkers. Okay, she's joining us over here by Skype. All right, and she runs the move your chairs over if you want to see more easily. I'm in the way. She runs the Sierra Club's Seize the Grid campaign. Okay. And as you can probably imagine, it's putting the frighteners on utilities. All right, Anastasia, what's this about? How are you accelerating our way to a clean energy future?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So as you said, my name is Anastasia, and I have the extreme pleasure of working with students all across the country on the Seize the Grid campaign, which is the Sierra Student Coalition's campaign for 100% clean energy by 2030 on campuses nationwide. We're working with high schools, college campuses, university campuses, and it grew out of this work that we've done to retire over half of the on-campus coal plants in the country. So I've gotten to work with hundreds of students over the years, and what I've seen in working with campuses is that campuses and communities are going to have much more power and influence on utility companies and the overall electricity grid by collaborating together on this transition to clean energy.
So give me an example of that. So basically you're saying that campuses aren't just going it alone then, they're collaborating together. What's the benefit of not going it alone then for a campus and for your radical activist students who are lobbying utilities to get clean energy? Why band together? What's the benefit?
Yeah, absolutely. Campuses and communities they're facing the same challenges in this transition to clean energy. Campuses are facing tremendous rate hikes at the same time that individual community members are. And so you can imagine, as a university or as a school district, the rate hike means you're paying millions of extra dollars in your energy bills that's being taken away from your classrooms. You can see large universities like Indiana University or University of North Carolina being terrified of these utility companies because of these rate hikes.
So your gist here then is that if they band together, what? They get better rates? What's the result of banding together here?
Yeah, in banding together you just have a lot more power going to the utility company, especially a utility company like Duke Energy or PG&E in California, and demanding something different, demanding 100% clean energy for your campus, there's an example right now.
Okay, so I got it. So the value proposition here is you band together, you've got more power, right? yourselves as activists. All right, talking of power and putting the frights on the utilities, I want to bring Eban Goodstein in here. Now, he's a professor. He's got a suit on, right? He's a professor at Bard College. I hear there's some dialogue or something going on with power that you're involved with, Eban. How are you putting the frights on these utilities?
Thank you, Sue. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. And this idea of banding together, moving beyond your campus is pretty critical. And in particular, I think in terms of getting a voice as a generation, right? You know, people who are 18 to 23, you guys are going to be around in 2050, 2060, and your kids are going to be around in 2100. So what we're talking about right now is very real to you, right? In a way that's maybe less real to my generation and the folks who are in charge. So what we're doing at Bard, the graduate program that I run in environmental policy at Bard, is that we are this year running a thing called the Power Dialogue. And this is an effort next April, 4/4/16, to get 10,000 college and university students around the country in every state capital engaged in face-to-face dialogue with regulators who are by law now charged with coming up with plans to cut global warming pollution. So it's really about policy. How do we actually change the rules or get the kind of rules in place at the national level in every state, because it's legally mandated now. There's a lot of pushback. These people are getting lobbied by utility executives and industry lobbyists. They need to hear from you, right? They need to hear from college and university students across the country about your future and your reality. And that's what the Power Dialogue is all about.
So you want student activists to go and meet up with their Senate leaders in their capitals and basically tell them, we want strong standards for clean air from our utilities, low carbon, clean energy now, and don't water down those standards.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. So every state now has a target that the EPA set. So New York is 45%.
Okay.
So the idea is students in Albany, students in Austin, students in Nashville.
Well, all over the country.
All over the country, every state.
And they network together so that they're even more powerful because they know what they're all doing. They succeeded in Albany, so they're going to succeed in Boston, right?
Yep.
All right, we've got a lot of BU students here. All right. So we've got another network going here that's got a little power, the frights from the utilities. We should have had a utility guy, shouldn't we? Okay. Talking of putting the frighteners on people, I'm going to just pop back here to Ann Kelly on Skype, okay? Ann Kelly is with Series, a non-profit coalition that actually works with quite a lot of companies. And she has some interesting approaches that might not exactly put the frighteners on people exactly, but she's also active in working with companies to influence legislation and policymakers. And I want to ask you, Anne, why is it that you feel that companies, students, community groups should be actively engaging their capitals, like even suggesting the Power Dialogue? Why do it now? Why now at this point in time?
Well, thank you, Sue. And can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
I mean, participatory democracy works when people participate. So I completely support what Eban is doing. We absolutely need to do the same with forward-thinking businesses and investors, which is what we do. And because Mark Kenber is there, I just want to compliment the RE100 initiative and be a little more practical in terms of what students and campuses can do right away. This week, RE100 announced that Nike and Starbucks were going 100% renewable. And as I thought about this conversation and ours earlier, those are not just climate commitments. Those are enduring commitments, long-term, that need to be reinforced by everybody who goes in to order a complex coffee drink. Thank you for your RE100 commitment. I'll take a solar-powered latte, thank you very much. Reinforce that over and over. We need to tweet that. We now need 1 million people to tweet to Starbucks and say thank you for joining RE100. And every purchase, let's make sure we go in and reinforce that. And I feel the same.
Okay, so what you're saying here then, Anne, is this, that when companies like Starbucks make a commitment to go 100% renewable power, you want to extend the networks to include all of us, students and all constituents, to go in and actually thank them for what they're doing.
Absolutely do. One of the contributions of this particular college generation, they've taught us that acknowledgement and thank you and direct feedback, immediate feedback, is vital. It's vital to action. So we need to use
all right. So we need to use that power and direct action. And I'm sure at some point somebody's going to bring up the topic of social media, right? Because If you haven't posted already some of the things you find interesting to CleanEnergyU, I want to see them up there on that screen shortly. All right, so thanks, Anne. That's pretty inspiring. You mentioned the Renewable 100 and companies making commitments to renewable energy. So let's bring in another company here at this point. Let's bring in Dave Tulauskas, who is with General Motors of Chevy fame. Dave, how is it that, let's focus on renewables, okay? What is it that General Motors and Chevy are doing to help accelerate that investment in renewables? And how, are you just going it alone? I mean, are you big enough to just sail along as an island? Or how do you do renewables?
So two sides of our business, one the product side, one the plant side, the factory side. And we're kind of a frightener to utilities as well as a huge opportunity. I mean, electric vehicles are a growth opportunity for utilities. They're also a way to help optimize their grid through connectivity, through storage and releasing and softening the peak demand. So it's a great opportunity, but we need to collaborate. We need to be able to talk to each other. The cars, the grid, the charging systems need to talk together. On the plant side, we see renewable as just a huge business benefit. One, it drives certainty and price signals for us when we have renewable on the grid. It provides business continuity and improves the resilience of our facilities. And again, we have 104 megawatts that we're using around the world, but each one of those megawatts is literally like a unique project that we need to do it. So it takes a lot of time. It's not efficient. So we've partnered. We can't do it alone. To answer your question,
you can't.
So
you don't do it. Even General Motors doesn't do it alone. Okay, so who do you partner with?
So we've worked with 12 other companies and have been brought together by World Wildlife Fund, the World Resource Institute, and basically we collectively came together and said, listen, public utility commissions, utilities, developers, if you can execute your projects in this way, one, we'll provide the demand. So this is a safe business for you. We'll lower the risk for financing to come in, but you got to do it this way so we can get away from these one-off, unique projects. We need to streamline bringing on renewable energy. And then that...
So you're standardizing,
basically. You're
trying to standardize investments of renewable energy at scale.
Yes.
Wow.
And so we're working with the developers, the standards, but we're also working with other companies. So we partnered with the Rocky Mountain Institute, and they've created the Renewable Business Center. So any business out there that wants to do a renewable business project, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. Go to the Renewable Business Center, they'll help you put the package together. So we're trying to drive consistency in the demand and the consistency in the product available.
Wow. So you're really trying to tackle this at a more systemic level. I think there's a student intern who's traveled internationally. See, who was that? That was Chen, right? Chen, all right, look. You visited Kenya, Eastern Africa, is that right?
Yep.
And so tell us a little bit about what you saw in terms of this theme that we're at the moment in terms of renewables. What's happening in Kenya on renewables?
Yeah, so I got the fortunate opportunity to travel to Kenya as a public health student this summer, working on a local project in the southern part of a very remote region of Kenya. And I just kind of, from my personal experience, seeing from like the roadside, a lot of the homes, very basic homes and health clinics in those settings were powered by solar panels.
So was your sense that there was more renewable power on homes and clinics and hospitals in Kenya than you would see here in the United States?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that statement. Because
What? You want to say that again? Yes? There's more renewable power in Kenya, guys. Okay. All right, so we're going to have to dig into this. Why? What on earth is going on? How come Kenyans can get renewable power more easily in place than we can with General Motors pushing this? Okay, why? What was going on? How did they make it work?
I mean, I think the trend, not just in Kenya, but like a lot of sub-Saharan countries and kind of developing countries, is that because they didn't have the existing infrastructure already in place, like the coal, the nuclear energy, and all of that. So it was probably more cost-effective to how like a lot of the sub-Saharan African countries are adopting mobile technology a lot faster than even here in the U.S. because they just able to leap over the old.
So they leap over all the old infrastructure. Okay, so basically, if I kind of get you then, because we've got old coal plants here that we've already basically paid for.
Yeah, it's definitely more cost effective to just adopt those solar panels and wind turbine and more of that.
All right, so let me try and get an analogy. So it's a bit like if you've got a car that you've already paid for and you don't have to pay the loan down anymore. The only thing that it costs you to drive that car is the gasoline and the servicing, right? And that's the problem that we've got with our power systems here in America. Okay, but when it comes to Kenya, they don't have that problem. It would be really expensive to run a coal-fired plant there because you'd have to pay down the loan.
Exactly.
All right, so we've got some kind of barriers here. We've got some unique barriers that make it kind of complicated. All right, I'm going to go back to Mark. I'm going to ask him the big kahuna question. All right, so come on then. With these barriers in place, how are we going to make it work here in the States? I mean, and in Europe, in westernized countries? What's it going to take to get renewable power to mainstream?
Well, some of it's happening already, and I'm sure you're going to hear this from others. The cost of renewable power has come down so fast and so far in the last 5 to 10 years that I think, it was in 100 countries I read last week, renewables have reached the same cost as coal and existing fossil fuel infrastructure. Okay, so that doesn't deal with the sunk costs. But if you think in developing countries, as we've heard already, and big developing countries, India, China and others, who can leapfrog our existing infrastructure, but also we're seeing that the consumers, and this is where the students and all the rest of us come in, are demanding clean energy. We don't want to be responsible for polluting our local environment, for causing climate change. It's our kids, our grandkids, and like Andrew, I hope to be around in 2052. So it's us too that are going to suffer the consequences.
So we're back to the demand again. We're back to the demand from companies, as Anne was saying, with renewable 100s, to the demand with Anastasia from students. It's the demand that's really got to pull it in. All right, so let's turn let's turn and ask this same question to Andrew Winston. Okay, because he's spent a lot of time talking with a lot of different companies, a lot of different stakeholders, and asking the big kahuna questions, right? Okay, how are we going to get to a renewable future and restructure all of these systems? How are we actually going to get there? All right, let me ask you the same question, Andrew. Okay, we're talking, I believe you've talked about radical collaboration. All right, now why is, and what's the recipe in your view?
Yeah, well, I think if you step back and think about the role of companies and what we're all taught in business school or entering companies is that we're supposed to compete. It's always about competition, and GM is not supposed to help Ford, and Ford's not supposed to help GM, and everyone's separate. But what's changed, I think, and this is what I call radical, is that the challenges we're facing now are so systemic, and they are unlike anything we've, I think, dealt with in kind of human history. Climate change, water, and water is an incredibly shared resource. Building a circular economy, kind of closing the loops on things. We need companies to be working together in ways that they really aren't used to. So when I talk about radical collaboration, I mean,
give me an example.
Well, first and foremost, it means to me like direct competitors working together. So, what David maybe didn't mention is some of these groups that they're involved in, their competitors are in there as well. There's a longer term example of Coke and Pepsi working together on moving to different kinds of refrigerants. Refrigerants, keeping things cold, huge global warming potential gases, enormous amounts of global warming from just keeping drinks cold. You've got direct competitors that hate each other, working together on new technologies, working with their supply chain. And then what makes it radical to me is bringing together your whole value chain, working on deep systemic issues that the goals are very, very large, right? Changing an entire system of a particular form of technology or energy, reaching 1 billion people, these kinds of targets, really big goals, or RA100 that I work a little bit with Mark and his group, setting a target of being 100% renewable, which most companies really don't know how to do. So it's radical to set a goal in a company where you're not sure how to get there. That's very unusual. Doing this quarter, but to say in the next 10, 20, 30 years we're going to do this and not know how, I think is radical. And then finally it's radical, I think, to work with governments, to work with your customers, and the social media you mentioned, the open connectivity that we now can bring together and innovate together is new. And this is all new for business, and they're learning new skills. And I think this generation has to bring those skills and those expectations to the companies they go work for and buy from.
So what I'm hearing you say is radical collaboration is about bringing people into the room who you would never normally expect to collaborate. Direct competitors, supply chains that are competing with each other. I hear you saying that it's about bringing partners together who, from civil society, companies, non-profits, community groups, who again would traditionally think of each other as unlikely bedfellows, and setting a vision essentially, a bold, a moonshot type kind of objective, even if you don't know how you're going to get there. We're talking about kind of collaboration. I'd like to draw on one of the student leaders here. Ryan is an intern at BU, and he found himself working actually with Chevrolet a little earlier this year as a BU intern. So I don't think he ever expected when he joined BU that he'd be partnering with Chevrolet, right, Ryan?
No, not at all.
All right, so does this count as a radical collaboration in your book?
Yeah, definitely.
What were you up to?
So at BU, over the last several years, we've been using some creative accounting techniques, sort of, to really drive some reductions in our carbon footprint on campus. And so to accelerate that, we really needed to kind of like think outside the box and find some creative partners. So Chevy approached us, offering to help us through this process to take these carbon reductions we had already made and then validate those through a third party and then actually sell those back to Chevy to take completely off the market permanently. To take that carbon, you know, completely out of the equation.
To benefit the planet, basically.
Just exclusively, yeah.
So the reductions benefited the planet, but you got the money.
Yeah.
And what does BU do with the money?
So we're using the money to then accelerate further climate efforts, you know, to grow that fund that we've been using.
So to go to even more clean energy,
yes,
even more aggressively at BU.
Yeah.
So kind of like win-win-win, radical collaboration.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to build value on both sides of the equation. You know, Chevy gets to, you know.
So Chevy gets to be radical too, because they just put loads of money in and they just benefited the planet. What happened to profits there? All right, okay. All right, you can ask Dave that question later on when we get into the other part of the workshop. All right, so we've got some radical collaborations happening there. All right, let's turn to Duncan, another BU, American University student, I beg your pardon. All right, Duncan, what are you seeing? What kinds of unusual actions are you seeing are being effective here?
Yeah, so continuing on the theme of radical collaboration, so I've done some work on the local level in my hometown community to implement climate action solutions. And so on a local level, we have this unique set of conditions that actually make smooth collaboration between different stakeholders who wouldn't necessarily normally, you know, agree on, certain worldviews. But the reason we see this is because local climate action is, at the same time that it's good for the environment, it's good for the economy. So on the local level, certain barriers to progress that exist on the national and state level, we see them sort of dissolve. So, like I said, whereas sometimes, you know, economic interests and environmental concerns, that tension creates barriers to progress on the local level. Climate, what municipal governments can do to decrease their carbon footprint is oftentimes beneficial to the local economy.
So you've basically found that working to bring all of those parties together locally has been more effective for you in your community than working in a broader context. Let's turn now to somebody who does this at the local level here in New York City. Patrick Love works with the Sustainability Office right here in NYC, and he and hospitals and non-profit groups, all sorts of different sectors.
And universities.
And universities you can join too, okay? To help again, accelerate our way to a lower carbon future. I'm going to ask you one short question here, Patrick. Why did you bring them together? Why did you ask them to come together and learn or collaborate with each other? What was the point of that?
So the point of the Carbon Challenge program is to really create a program that develops and showcases these leaders within the city to then act as case studies for other buildings in the city to show that these deep carbon reductions in their buildings are easy to make to a certain extent, and then also highly replicable across other buildings in New York City.
So they're learning from each other, that's the benefit?
learning from one another, yes. And
okay, are they challenging each other?
Challenging one another, yes, because they've made this percentage reduction commitment, so there's definitely a competitive aspect.
So there's competition between them, but they're collaborating?
Exactly, yes.
Oh, okay. How do you really push that competition? Do you have like a leaderboard? How do you get them to really compete with each other?
So we publish the carbon reductions to date for all of the universities and hospitals, and then give them that information on an annual basis where they can see their percentage reduction compared to the other universities.
Oh my gosh, so you've got leaders and laggards even whilst they're coming together to share best practices. All right, I want to turn to Tim Carter. He is president of Second Nature that has convened an amazing come together to collaborate initiative with the ACU PCC, which is a series of commitments that university presidents have made in order to reduce their carbon emissions on campuses. And he has them collaborating with each other. You know, he has them competing with each other. But what I want to really ask him is, when you talk, Tim, with these presidents, we've heard from students, we've heard from companies, but you talk with presidents on campuses, right? When you ask them, you know, how can campuses collaborate with their communities to move to a clean energy future, what are you hearing?
It's really interesting. Thanks, Sue, for having us. And over the course, so the ACPCC is the American College University President's Climate Commitment. It's the worst acronym you could probably imagine. And actually, in a couple of weeks, we'll be relaunching it under a new identity, so it'll be an exciting change for us. But when you ask presidents, what is it that your community is about, the first thing is they ask us, right back, what do you mean when you say community?
What do you mean when you say community?
Because many of these universities, not only is it their physical proximity, they're located in a place, but then they have, 10 other campuses all around the state. Well, SUNY's a good example. There's a SUNY ESF. It's in Syracuse, right? But then it has tons of forest holdings in upstate New York, and it actually has a Manhattan presence that it's working to expand. So when we asked the president there, well, we're going to introduce resilience into these commitments, what does that look like for your community? He immediately went with, well, I actually have 3 communities I had to deal with. And actually that introduces a ton of opportunity for us to engage with non-traditional, not just government folks, but other types of partners in these areas.
So because campus presidents don't just assume what their community is, and they're asking that question, like, does that open the door for them to think more radically like Andrew was talking about, so that they can expand beyond what their default assumptions would be? Give me an example of, like, I think you mentioned like a hospital and a campus that came together. Why did they come together?
I mean, American and George Washington and GW Hospital is one of great examples recently of these large-scale renewable projects that was done. The project's actually done in North Carolina, but they all came together. Those 3 institutions came together and did a big PPA off-site, and they only really did it because they were jointly working together. They all have shared similar goals. They need, universal demand. Hospitals have to be going 24/7. Universities have to be going 24/7. So what characteristics of the partners can you share? I think that's what's more interesting than, our sector is the same as maybe other schools in our sector, but what different types of characteristics within different sectors share things that then benefit these, these collaborative.
Okay, so 2 things coming out of this then. If you ask the question about community, you're going to think out of the box as to who you might collaborate with. But it is not random. You don't just go and say, oh, I'm going to collaborate with Chen here, right? The reason that the campus and the hospital came together is because they had a very similar interest around what they needed from renewable energy, right? On demand, don't fail, the emergency room can't go down. All right, so when we're thinking about partnering and collaborating, we're going to have to get reasonably strategic about this, is what you're saying. All right. We talked a lot about collaborating out and beyond the boundaries of the organizations that we're in, but before we kind of move into the more interactive part of the dialogue, I want to go back to our second question here, which is about leadership. All right, so if we're going to find ways to radically collaborate, as Andrew would put it, and everybody's been talking about, all right, what are the leadership qualities that are going to get us there? And I want to turn to Lindsay Chu, at BU. Because she's a student leader that actually designed and put together this hashtag CleanEnergyU dialogue. All right? So I'm really personally intrigued to hear at this point from the students as to what they think leadership to this future in your eyes.
Yeah, so thank you, Sue. I think well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for being here today. It's really amazing to have so many people from different walks of life tackling the same issue in a myriad of different ways, and it's pretty amazing to just have this space right here in New York City during Climate Week in the first place. And so thank you to everyone, first of all. But also, I think that exactly what everybody else has
So what's leadership? What's leadership for you?
Leadership
Come on.
is really inclusion.
Inclusion.
Inclusive in the way that we tackle these problems.
Why? What's inclusiveness about for you? Why is leadership about inclusiveness?
Right, so...
Who do we need to include?
We need to include students, first
Ah.
of all, because they're all here. We need to definitely include students, disenfranchised people, people from different races, ethnicities, people from different socioeconomic statuses. Essentially everyone who is human. We're all human at the base of it all. And we all have valuable insights and experiences to share.
Okay, so if we're not essentially all involved in this clean energy dialogue and in this pursuit, that really concerns you. Now, why did you then create CleanEnergyU as a social media Twitter conversation? Why is that inclusive? Why is that inclusive leadership in your perspective?
Right, so without the platform of social media, which in a way could be a platform for radical collaboration, we wouldn't all be here in the same room. We wouldn't have the instantaneous connection that we have with everybody in the room can tweet at the same time and see insights and ideas, and we're forced to put it into 140 characters so that we'll share the key insights quickly and fast.
So essentially it gives CEOs access to the conversation, and they get 140 characters. So Dave only gets 140 characters here, and so does Andrew, and so does Eban, and so does everybody else. So do you. So do students. It levels the playing field in some senses, then,
yes,
as it connects people seamlessly.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's inclusive leadership for you.
Exactly, and it's the way that we've been able to get people to listen to what we're going to say. We've got 1 million views per each of the CleanEnergyU events, and that's thanks to the collaborations that we've fostered, and it shows that people are actually listening.
Wow, so you got 100 million views so far. So inclusive is working through this CleanEnergyU Twitter dialogue. All right, so I want to bring in at this point Lucy, because I want to know a little bit more from another student. Who's on the outside? Who's not included at the moment in this clean energy conversation? Who are you worried about, Lucy? Who do you want to bring in?
Well, I would want to bring in those people that you talked about, the disenfranchised. You could even extend it to students on campus who aren't a part of the clean energy conversation, who refuse to take part of it because they don't care about it. I think leaving them out of the conversation is a huge problem and a potential setback because it's essentially, a lot of untapped manpower, if you will. I think it's important to dig into why they aren't taking part of the conversation, why they resist so much, and why they don't bother to care. Because, I think once you get past that barrier, you have a lot more manpower and another voice added to your conversation and your movement.
All right, so if I'm hearing you right, Lucy, you're talking about fellow students on campus who, if I can put it this way, aren't already part of the sustainability or clean energy choir. They're not singing the hymn. There's no kumbaya coming on a Monday night when you say it's Meatless Mondays and everybody groans. Is that the idea?
Right, I'm actually friends with a lot of those people.
They groan on Monday nights. Okay. All right, so now I want which is how on earth, and I'm going to ask students to help us with this one, how on earth do we reach beyond the choir? How are we going to reach the students who groan when it's Meatless Mondays? Okay, so Matt, you're next in the line here, so you got that hot seat bun. All right, so how are we going to communicate in ways that actually pull these folks in?
So I think the first most important step is understanding what these students do care about. It's making value congruent science communications. We need to engage them and kind of flip the question.
Flip the question, how do you mean?
So for example, one person at Yale that we've worked with is Michelle Wyman, who used to be at the DOE. And she's from Texas and has a very conservative mayor. And approached her mayor and knew that her mayor cared a lot about asthma because of his son. And in essence said, look at your coal-fired power plants. They're contributing to this public health issue that we see in our town. And eventually was able to keep that conversation moving and flipping the questions, and you can care about public health and asthma by caring for climate change, by utilizing clean energy, by getting rid of fossil fuels. And now this mayor is a champion, a climate champion. And so via these value congruent science communications that dissect climate change and clean energy into all these different narratives, we can address those students who don't necessarily care about climate change, but care about a myriad of other things.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is find out what floats somebody's boat.
Exactly.
All right, find out what they really care about. Don't talk about climate change. Don't talk about clean energy. Find out what they are really deeply passionate about.
Exactly.
And then figure out in your own mind how clean energy is going to help them deliver what they want and care about most.
Exactly.
Whoa. All right. Oh dear. Okay. So, Kyle, you're next in line. All right. So what kind of leadership are we going to need to develop if we're going to go around asking people about all the other things that they care about? I thought we only cared about clean energy. What does that say about the kind of leadership we're going to need now?
Sure. So this example about finding something that floats somebody else's boat, and it takes a huge amount of risk-taking. You don't hear risk-taking as something that is a huge leadership skill, because it can go both ways as a negative and positive. But reaching across the aisle and against the grain to someone who doesn't necessarily have the same opinion as you is what you have to do in this case. You need to find the commonalities, figure out where you can meet common ground, and be patient with that person. Patient in the sense that it may take a little bit of time for them to come around and understand where you're coming from, but in the long run, that is a huge reward to gain the manpower, to gain that almost, that type of collaboration that we're talking about that doesn't necessarily go with the path that, is common.
Oh, that's really interesting. So I'm hearing that leadership, the kind of leadership needed to make this work, is basically patient risk-taking.
Yes.
Being willing to put in the time and energy and the length of time, the time horizon, the patience to be able to pull the conversation around in that kind of fashion to work for what people care about the most.
Yes.
All right, well, let's go back to Matt for a moment then. So Matt, if this is going to take a lot of time, does this mean that your Texas mayor is the only convert in this process so far? I mean, are we going to have to wait till 20, 50, 70, 80 before this communication thing is going to pull, a few more folks into its
Yeah, not at all. So actually, there's an incredible professor at Yale, Paul Lucier, and he's put together a team of students under the Yale Climate Change Communications Network, and we're working across sectors with governors, with Virgin Earth, with the IPCC to create museum exhibits, establish institutes for carbon dioxide removal, and just kind of go for these energy communications projects that take advantage of this new incredible theory.
Wow. So there are other folks actually kind of getting on board with this. It's gonna happen more quickly than we might think.
Yeah, all across the globe.
Because it's happening in parallel, all over the place, all over the world, globally. All right, I'm going to come back to Anastasia in a moment, okay? Because I want to hear a little bit from her about in 3 words, Anastasia, okay? Leadership qualities that you value most in students like these who we've heard from. Okay, what are the 3 leadership qualities the most important in your Seize the Grid networks? 1, 2, 3.
Networking, being a visionary, and being resilient.
Networking. All right, we heard a lot of that going on in the solutions we were talking about. Visionary. Yeah. Okay, so visionary. So that's your moonshot kind of idea, right? And resilience.
Absolutely. For all the times you hear a no, what gets you up again to talk to the next person, get a yes.
All right. I kind of hear resilience over there with Kyle's nodding, right? He's like, yeah, that's patient risk-taking. And if you haven't got resilience to go with patient risk-taking, you're gonna flake out at the second fence, right?
That's right.
All right. So let's just maybe return and close out here with Tim. So, because most of the folks who are viewing this are going to be campus leaders, how do you see the presidents defining leadership, Tim? You've heard how the students define leadership towards a clean energy future. You know, does this fit with what campus presidents are thinking?
Well, I think you can see from the history that at least we've worked with campus presidents really being bold in their commitments. So 9 years ago, when people started the ACPCC, and it wasn't that much later that they started the New York commitment. There was a very uncertain future, and our presidents were committing to carbon neutrality. So the idea that energy was going to drop and renewable energy was going to drop in price by such a rapid and significant amount was not even on anybody's radar. So they were committing to neutrality, and some of them, the climate action plans have 2020 as a goal, 2035, and it's not 2090, it was really imminent. So these are bold leadership commitments that really had a lot of uncertainty attached to it, and that's the kind of thing we see really moving serious needles when there's uncertainty in the future, and yet you're willing to step into it anyway.
So what you're saying is, be bold in your commitments, be visionary, do the moonshot stuff. Don't be incremental in that sense, in the way in which you conceive of what you're up to.
Right, our founder, Tony Cortese's, I don't know, famous for saying, but he has said, we definitely need incremental action. That's absolutely something, but we don't need incremental thinking.
No incremental thinking.
And so the incremental thinking is what kind of stalls people out. So we need really, transformative thinking along with the incremental steps to get us there.
All right. Last one, Andrew. Is that kind of consistent with, give me 3-word definition of leadership for radical collaboration, just like Anastasia did. 3 words. 3 words.
Unexpected, ambitious, impatient.
All right. 3 words for leadership from Dave.
Passion, persistence, and
those will do. Passion and persistence. Eban.
Passion and patience.
Patience. Right. Eban.
No, these words are getting repetitive, but I would say listening, talking, around the vision.
Fantastic. Mark, last one.
Ambition, trust, and persistence.
All right. So you're hearing some themes coming out here, right? And what we're going to move to here in just a moment is we are going to ask you to come up with your own solutions, okay, for what you think a clean energy future. Whoa, all right, it's not supposed to fall down. All right, for what the kind of solutions that you think a clean energy future can. Okay, these solutions will help us drive to a clean energy future. Of where we'll be going with this, I just want to do a little worked example whilst we're still streaming, all right? Okay, Chen, hold that for me. All right, this is Anastasia's Seize the Grid program, all right? And if she was going to write this Seize the Grid program on her solution poster, she would say, title, okay, this is her solution in 1 word, Seize the Grid, okay? And here's her campus with the mortarboard. She's calling for 100% renewable power right now. So her image tells us what she wants. And there's her call to action at the bottom. Demand 100% clean energy, renewable energy for your campuses. All right, I'm going to turn to the panelists now. All right, we've been gassing on about radical collaboration. All right, I want your feedback for Anastasia. Okay, so she's working with students to get them to campaign their administrations to get renewable power, okay? You're all going to have post-its in a moment or two, and you're going to be providing feedback. What else could Anastasia do here that would amp up the power of her program? From what you've all said so far, I mean, is there anybody else who's doing renewable power?
Well, she could be teaming up with some of the companies that Anne mentioned that are making these bold commitments, thanking them first and then asking them to collaborate.
All right, so thanks Starbucks. Team up with companies that are making bold commitments. Does that include companies like Chevy? Yes, because Chevy talked about it, right? Okay.
I'd say also involve the students in this on campus, not just the ones that are being activated to demand it, but you could also say it's going to be easier for a campus to get to 100% renewable if they've also cut their energy use in half at the same time. I mean, there could be a lot of activity that you could bring everybody into that would help drive down.
Okay, so who's she going to bring in to drive the energy efficiency side of it? Where are her other radical partners?
Well, she could look to other leading universities like Ball State University that's implemented geothermal, and other universities that are already there, and students could engage them to share best practices.
Okay, so she's already got campuses kind of working with each other across the country, right? So I think what we're hearing here
campuses and build a renewable future that
right.
campuses.
So the
Yeah, I actually loved the idea of partnering with Power Dialogue and getting students in the room with utility lifelong advocates for clean energy.
All right, let me really put you on the spot. What about Sierra Club students partnering with companies who are activists in their own right and are lobbying and pushing for renewable power in the same town?
Yes. Oh gosh, teaming up with companies is definitely a new idea for Sierra Student Coalition, and we're going to team up with companies like Starbucks. It's great to celebrate 100% clean energy, but we also have to be pushing them on other social responsibility factors, and not just focusing on clean energy as isolated from social justice. So.
All right, so we can hear this is pushing your boundaries, right? You're like, yes, but, all right? When you get to the yes, but, I'm not really sure, you know that you're at the uncomfortable edge. You're in an interesting place, okay? Is that what makes it radical if you don't feel comfortable, Andrew?
That's correct.
Okay, all right? So you can see in working this with Anastasia that to get radical, you can put things out there where, who on earth would honestly in their right mind thinking of suggesting to the Sierra Club that they partner with companies to push for renewable energy? It's not normally in their wheelhouse, is it, Anastasia? Right?
It hasn't been a wheelhouse of Sierra Student Coalition. We've been very much focused on campus-oriented work and working with students.
Right. So as we move into now the next kind of section of our workshop, I'm sure you guys have got questions. As we move into this interactive part, you're going to be working with everybody here, interacting with them directly. So there's lots and lots of opportunities to ask questions as we move into it. If there's like one or two burning questions, I mean, absolutely have to get this out there, we'll take them now. If not, you've got another hour and a half, okay, to ask questions. Anybody burning with a question right now? All right. So at this point, I think we want to thank very much our panelists and say cheerio and adios to the folks who are streaming with us. Probably ask Chen to go turn the streaming off, and we'll move into the next part of the dialogue. All right, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, first thing. Thank you guys. Right. Okay. Okay.